April 1999. A courtroom in California. Before Judge Lawrence Mira stands a man, unkempt and weary, clad in the orange garb of the incarcerated and rubber sandals. At 33, he is an Academy Award nominee who has watched his home, his marriage, and his very grip on reality slip away. Despite the best efforts of his high-profile counsel, the man famous for the O.J. Simpson acquittal, the situation remains dire. The magistrate observes him in the heavy silence of the chamber. Robert Downey Jr. begins to speak. He possesses a natural gift for oratory, a talent for captivating an audience and drawing them in. Yet, in this moment, the performance has vanished. It feels as though a shotgun is pressed against my palate. He declares, his tone chillingly calm as honesty replaces artifice. With my own finger resting on the trigger, and I have grown fond of the metallic tang of the steel. The court hands down a sentence of 3 years within the state penitentiary system. This was not the absolute nadir of his journey. It was merely a stop along the way. The Chronicle of Robert Downey Jr. stands as one of the most scrutinized cycles of ruin and redemption in modern Hollywood history. His plight has been analyzed by every major publication, debated in legal halls and recovery centers, and discussed behind closed doors by executives weighing the cost of a genius plagued by self-immolation. Yet, the entire trajectory from a childhood in Greenwich Village, where a father introduced him to narcotics before he could even comprehend them, to clutching a golden statuette in March 2024, while reflecting on his difficult upbringing to a cheering crowd, is a path that demands careful reflection. This is far more than a simple narrative of chemical dependency. It is a meditation on legacy. It explores the burdens placed upon us before we possess the agency to decline them. It examines how an individual can be stripped of their livelihood, their pride, and their sanctuary, yet still discover a path back to the light. Ultimately, it is a testament to the steep price one pays to overcome their own shadow. He entered the world on April 4th, 1965. In the heart of Manhattan, the younger sibling, in a family that was, by any standard, remarkable, yet utterly ill-equipped for the task of nurturing a child. His father, Robert Downey Sr., lacked the mainstream fame his son would eventually achieve. He occupied a more prestigious niche, an avant-garde visionary and counterculture icon whose 1969 work, Putney Swope, became a cinematic legend. He was a man who crafted films on such meager budgets that his spouse's paychecks were often spent before they were even signed. Upon his passing in July 2021, Rolling Stone honored him as a provocateur who delighted in challenging the status quo and dismissing polite society. Born Robert John Elias Jr., he adopted the surname Downey from a stepfather to join the military while still a minor. He was described as a man of immense charm and wit, yet profoundly reckless in the way only brilliant, troubled souls can be. His mother, Elsie Ann Ford, was a performer of German and Scottish descent who graced her husband's films. She later confessed that she never witnessed her son experience true, unadulterated joy during his youth. "I have never seen Bobby genuinely happy," she remarked in later years. "He does not enjoy life. He merely enjoys playing different lives." Their existence was one of constant motion, from Manhattan to Queens, across the ocean to London, then through New Mexico, Los Angeles, and the woods of Woodstock. These were not the orderly transitions of a professional family. They were frantic shifts, driven by fluctuating fortunes and the volatile energy of a home where art and chaos were inseparable. At the age of 5, Robert Jr. made his cinematic debut as a puppy in his father's film, Pound, a surreal piece where humans portrayed caged animals. His inaugural line was delivered with what journalists described as a dramatic lisp. 2 years following, in the film Greaser's Palace, his young character met a grim end at the hands of a divine figure, who then proceeded to strike down his mother, another member of the ensemble. He was only 7 years old. When he reached 13, His parents parted ways. He spent time in New York with his mother before moving west to reside with his father in California. He attended Santa Monica High School but departed by the 11th grade. With the quiet approval of his father, a telling sign of the domestic climate, he abandoned formal education and returned to New York to dedicate himself to the craft of acting. Then, there was the matter of the substances. To say it began suggests a choice. But for Robert Jr., it was an intrinsic part of his environment long before he understood its weight. Reports indicate that his father first shared marijuana with him when he was only 8. It was not presented as a rebellion, but as a bridge, a shared ritual of intimacy in a house where traditional affection was absent. It would take decades for him to unpack the gravity of that moment. A relative once noted that as a small child, he simply had no concept of what was normal. That lack of a foundational standard for safety, for moderation, for peace would haunt him for the next 3 decades. By the mid-80s, he was carving out a legitimate career. He joined the ranks of Saturday Night Live for a season and found a role in Weird Science. He worked with the relentless momentum of a gifted young performer whom the industry recognized as exceptional, even if they hadn't yet found his perfect niche. The turning point arrived with Less Than Zero in 1987. He portrayed Julian Wells, a wealthy youth whose life disintegrated into addiction and tragedy. Observers noted that his performance felt uncomfortably authentic. Roger Ebert described the work as hauntingly precise, while the New York Times found it profoundly moving. Downey would later reflect that the character was a grim harbinger of his own future, a warning he failed to heed. Instead, he allowed his own life to mirror the fiction, eventually becoming a more extreme version of the very tragedy he portrayed. He was lost in a cycle of heroin and cocaine, drifting through countless treatment centers. Yet, remarkably, he continued to produce work so compelling that directors could not look away. In 1992, he took on the mantle of Charlie Chaplin. Tasked with portraying the icon across 60 years of life, Downey delivered a performance of such physical and emotional depth that it earned him a BAFTA and a nomination for an Oscar. At 27, he was hailed as one of the finest talents of his age. Away from the cameras, however, he was trapped in a revolving door of rehabilitation, playing the game of recovery without ever truly committing to the cure. During that same period, he entered a whirlwind marriage with Deborah Falconer, wed just 42 days after their initial meeting. Their son, Indio, was born the following year. While the union technically lasted 12 years, it was hollowed out early on by the same demons that were consuming every other part of his life. By 1995, his struggles had intensified into the use of heroin and freebase cocaine. Concerned friends, including Sean Penn and Dennis Quaid, attempted an intervention in early 1996, physically taking him to a facility in Arizona. He departed within a matter of days. That June, he was apprehended for speeding, leading to the discovery of a cache of narcotics and a loaded firearm. He was 31 years old, a celebrated actor, and mere weeks away from an incident that would forever stain his reputation. An unlocked door in the neighborhood, a child's bedroom, temporarily unoccupied. The ensuing emergency call, broadcast across the nation and preserved forever online, served as a grim chronicle of a man losing the battle against himself, a tragedy that had yet to reach its conclusion. We often speak of hitting bottom as a singular event, a moment of clarity. For Robert Downey Jr., that point was not a fixed location but a recurring destination. Whether it was the incident in 1996, the sentencing in 1999, or the hotel arrest in 2000, he seemed intent on finding new depths. The industry repeatedly counted him out, yet a spark of resilience remained. The world watched, wondering how many times a man could plummet before the fall itself became his only legacy. As it happens, the solution wasn't found in a statistic, but in a specific identity. In the year 1996, summer descended upon Malibu with its characteristic brilliance. cold detachment, and heavy price tag. Robert Downey Jr. walked free on bond following a June arrest. Serious narcotics allegations hung over him. He possessed a spouse and a young son. 3-year-old Indio. Beneath the debris of his recent past lay a profession that Hollywood refused to fully sever, simply because the community could not fathom such immense brilliance vanishing into thin air. On the evening of July 16th, 1996, that flame very nearly flickered out forever. The particulars of that night remain etched in the public record, verified by major outlets like Rolling Stone and national networks, alongside official judicial files. Immersed in a chemically induced haze, Downey wandered through the unlatched entrance of a nearby residence. He sought out a sleeping quarters. There, he crawled into the bed of the family's 11-year-old boy and succumbed to a deep slumber. The homeowner discovered the intruder while checking on her child. For one fleeting, disorienting heartbeat, she mistook him for her own son, until she drew close enough to recognize an adult male huddled beneath the quilts. When her attempts to rouse him failed, she dialed 911. She declined to pursue charges. That emergency recording rippled through the airwaves, echoing across celebrity news cycles and filling columns of newsprint. Eventually, the digital era archived it forever, 2 minutes of a bewildered woman trying to convey to a dispatcher that a world-renowned performer lay senseless in her toddler's bed. The public quickly branded the event the Goldilocks incident. While the label suggested a fairy tale, the reality was grim. Downey was rushed to the University of Southern California Medical Center, where medical staff fought to bring him back to life. By the next sunrise, Judge Lawrence Mira mandated his admission into a day-long recovery program at the Exodus facility in Marina del Rey. Within 48 hours, the actor fled through a restroom window, clad only in sleepwear and a vibrant Hawaiian shirt. He flagged down a ride back to his residence. His freedom lasted only 4 hours before authorities apprehended him, leading to a 9-day stint behind bars. This transpired a mere month after his initial detainment. He had found himself in handcuffs 3 times in the span of just 4 weeks. In September of 1996, he offered no defense against the narcotics charges from early summer. 2 months afterward, following a court-ordered stay in treatment, the bench handed down a 6-month residential rehabilitation term, 3 years of supervised release, and strictly enforced screening. Viewed through the lens of his future hardships, this judgment seemed almost merciful. It rested on the hope that the framework of oversight and accountability would be enough to anchor him. That safety net failed him. By the time 1997 arrived, Downey had already skipped a mandatory screening. A glaring breach of his terms, his supervisor noted the failure, and the bench took action. On August 5, 1999, after a string of missed appointments and documented relapses, the court sentenced him to a 3-year term at the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in Corcoran. His counsel at the time was Robert Shapiro. The prominent attorney famous for his role in the O.J. Simpson defense team, Shapiro summoned witnesses and presented a vigorous case. However, the presiding judge remained steadfast. Downey had previously endured half a year in the Los Angeles County lockup for his initial violation. He was briefly paroled in January of 1998 to finish his work on the film U.S. Marshals, a jarring illustration of Hollywood's priorities, where a man is pulled from a cell to complete a project only to be returned afterward. Remarkably, during the 1999 production of Wonder Boys, he remained entirely clean. Colleagues observed a transformation. He appeared revitalized, sharp, and fully engaged with the world. The cameras stopped rolling. His Malibu estate was lost. Financial burdens had been mounting quietly behind the chaotic headlines of his legal battles. His union with Deborah Falconer was crumbling not through a singular explosion of anger, but through the slow, persistent wearing away of a bond strained past its breaking point. Falconer initiated divorce proceedings in early 2001, citing irreconcilable differences. The marriage officially dissolved in 2004, with the court granting her custody of their son, Indio. He failed another court-mandated screening, leading to yet another arrest. In August of 1999, clad in orange institutional garb and plastic sandals, he spoke those haunting words about the metallic taste of a shotgun in his mouth. The judge then condemned him to 3 years in the state penitentiary. He spent roughly 12 months at Corcoran before gaining his freedom in August of 2000. A magistrate determined that his combined time across various facilities, stretching back to 1996, satisfied the requirements for early release on a $5,000 bond. $5,000? For a man who once commanded a salary of $7 million annually, glimpses of his life behind bars have emerged through various accounts. Biographer Ben Falk described Corcoran as a harsh environment where Downey was surrounded by dangerous individuals, a reality far removed from the luxury he had known for a decade. Reports suggest he lived in constant fear and profound isolation. Most companions from his days of indulgence had found sobriety and kept their distance. The elite circles had vanished. The hangers-on who once flocked to his $7 million lifestyle had migrated toward more stable stars. Fellow actor Tom Sizemore, who battled his own public demons, spoke candidly about that era. He recalled using drugs with Downey not in some glamorous fashion, but in a quiet, desperate haze. By the time Downey was sent to Corcoran, Sizemore had found his way to recovery. Another anonymous friend lamented the situation, noting that while they would decline a movie screening invitation, they would always be there if he decided to seek help in a recovery meeting. While incarcerated, Downey reached out to a Los Angeles psychiatrist, Dr. Mania Nikaktar, seeking guidance on his mental state. His stepmother, Rosemary, later disclosed to the press that he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder several years prior. She explained that this underlying condition was the primary hurdle to his sobriety, noting that proper medication and deep psychological therapy had never been truly integrated into his recovery. It was a tragic misalignment, a medical realization that arrived too late, or perhaps a treatment plan that prioritized the law while neglecting the mind. He walked out of Corcoran in August of 2005. Just 1 week later, he joined the cast of Ally McBeal. What followed was a sequence of events so laced with dark irony it felt scripted. Only months removed from a prison cell, effectively homeless and deemed uninsurable by the industry, Downey became the romantic lead on one of the nation's premier television shows. He secured a Golden Globe for the role and earned an Emmy nomination. As viewership soared, network executives considered making him the centerpiece of the series. Looking back, Downey categorized this period as his personal nadir in the grip of dependency. It is a startling admission, considering he was simultaneously receiving the highest honors of his profession. The brilliance on screen was authentic, and the accolades were deserved. Yet beneath the surface, the darkness remained in control. Over the Thanksgiving holiday in late November of 2000, less than 4 months after his release, he was apprehended at a luxury resort and spa in Palm Springs. The intervention began with a mysterious call to emergency services. An informant reported a distressed man in Suite 311 who was allegedly armed and in possession of narcotics. Law enforcement arrived and searched the premises, discovering nearly 4 grams of cocaine and several sedative tablets. Though no weapons were found, toxicology confirmed the presence of substances in his blood, and he was released the next morning on a $15,000 bond. Prosecutors in Riverside County moved forward with multiple felony counts for possession. As news outlets reported at the time, these charges carried significant weight. Given his prior history, the actor was staring down the possibility of an 8-year prison sentence. Television executives, who recently considered expanding his part, were forced to immediately overhaul their scripts. 4 months drifted away into April 2001, when a Los Angeles police officer discovered Downey wandering barefoot through Culver City. Law enforcement detained him under the suspicion of narcotic influence. Contemporaneous reports from CNN corroborated the incident. Medical screening confirmed cocaine within his blood. Following a brief detention, he was released. Ultimately, the district attorneys chose not to pursue formal litigation. The creators of Ally McBeal mandated emergency filming sessions. Immediately afterward, they severed his contract. By July 2001, as Downey entered a Riverside County courtroom to answer for the Palm Springs incidents, his reality had become terrifyingly clear. He possessed no home. He had become uninsurable, not merely due to his image, but because no completion bond firm in Hollywood would risk backing a film that featured him. Bankruptcy was imminent. His first marriage was dissolving. His son, Indio, was only 8 years old and residing with his mother. He offered no defense to a felony cocaine possession charge and a lesser count of being under the influence. Guided by California's Proposition 36, a law designed to pivot nonviolent addicts toward healing rather than cells, he received 3 years of probation and a mandate for residential treatment. He committed a year to Wavelengths International, a facility ordered by the state, CBS News observed. In March 2002, that a presiding judge expressed genuine approval regarding his rehabilitative progress. Deputy District Attorney Tamara Capone remarked to the press, "He is clean, he is industrious, and he appears to be avoiding further conflict." His legal counsel offered a more grounded perspective. "He has found a new maturity," the attorney noted. "He is finally ready to lean on others for support." There exists a narrative the most widely circulated, one that marks 2001 as the definitive point of rebirth. The surrender, that final arrest followed by a sincere change of heart. Structurally, this account holds weight. No further handcuffs touched him after April 2001. He settled into Wavelengths and remained there. He began the quiet, unglamorous labor of sobriety that would eventually grant him the profound authority to speak as a survivor years later. Yet this rebirth was not born of a single choice. It arose because every other path had vanished. The residence was gone. The union was shattered. The career that earned him a Golden Globe had evaporated. His professional future was a void. He had run out of ground to fall upon. In November 2004, he sat with Oprah Winfrey for an interview viewed by millions. When he claimed that achieving sobriety was not the most arduous task, the public anticipated a discourse on willpower, spirituality, or the power of affection. Instead, he offered this: "The true challenge lies in the decision itself. Most agonizing circumstances will eventually mend if you maintain persistence and refuse to vanish entirely. The choice, not the peak of the crisis, not the sirens, the courtroom, the stone walls, or the neighbor's open door. The choice which he situated in the spring of 2001, following that final detention in the stillness of a California sanctuary, was the only thing of consequence. By July 2003, a date confirmed by numerous records, he abandoned the use of all illicit substances completely. He has remained clean ever since. The ensuing chapter of this history is, in many respects, more miraculous than the tragedy preceding it. The collapse, though harrowing, followed a familiar human trajectory, the legacy of addiction, and a man burdened by tools he could not drop. The subsequent ascent had no precedent. Hollywood rarely extends such grace. Insurance firms do not typically rewrite their logic for a single soul. Actors who have inhabited state prisons, lost prestigious roles, or been found unconscious in strangers' homes do not, as a rule, stand on an Academy Awards stage 23 years later, honoring their fractured youth. Yet, one man did. The architect of this restoration was not a studio chief, a filmmaker, or a clinical healer. It was Mel Gibson. By the dawn of 2003, the industry viewed Robert Downey Jr. as a ghost. He was not merely struggling, he was considered finished. The completion bond entities, the financial guardians who shoulder the risk of unfinished films, had reached a collective verdict. No, No premium was high enough to cover him. No co-signer could bridge the gap. No project, regardless of size, was worth the gamble. The man had a prison record. He had been dismissed from a hit television series. He had faced 6 arrests in 5 years. To the industry, his past brilliance was no longer a currency they accepted. A solitary voice in Hollywood remained in dissent. By 2003, Mel Gibson was more than an actor. He was a cinematic titan, a status forged through Braveheart and the Lethal Weapon series. His commercial dominance granted him a rare form of power, the capacity to be expensively wrong and remain untouched. He and Downey had crossed paths for years within the industry's tight circles. Gibson had observed the downward spiral. He had refused to look away. In 2003, Gibson personally guaranteed the insurance for a project titled The Singing Detective, a musical where Downey would take the lead. Practically, Gibson placed his own wealth and stature between Downey and a world that refused to touch him. If Downey faltered, Gibson paid the price. If Downey appeared daily and fulfilled his duty, Gibson had simply won a wager that many deemed madness. Downey arrived every single day. He met every professional requirement. He perfected every single scene. The Singing Detective was no commercial giant. It was not an instant career revival in the traditional sense. However, it served a more vital purpose, proof of reliability. It was tangible evidence, captured on film, that Robert Downey Jr. could once again be trusted with a production. It proved the insurance data was obsolete. It showed that the artist nominated for an Oscar still existed within the man who had been lost 7 years prior. Gibson's gamble succeeded, not through ticket sales, but through something more enduring. It shifted the global conversation around Downey's future. What followed was not a sudden leap to the summit. It was a period of deliberate, painstaking reconstruction requiring a patience the industry rarely possesses and a consistency the actor had long lacked. He joined Gothica in 2003, alongside Halle Berry. In 2006, he starred in A Scanner Darkly, a surreal exploration of addiction that felt poignantly close to his own history. Rolling Stone lauded his performance as the film's most electric element. By 2007, he appeared in Zodiac, portraying journalist Paul Avery with the razor-sharp precision that had always been his hallmark when truly present. He was working. He was sober. According to his directors and peers, he was a different presence on set, prepared, engaged, and collaborative in ways that stunned those who only knew the tabloid legends. During the filming of Gothica in 2003, he met Susan Levin, an executive at Silver Pictures. She was known for her competence and a strict rule against dating actors. Initially, she remained indifferent. As she later recounted, that indifference eventually faded. Their romance blossomed during production and continued long after. He proposed on the eve of her 30th birthday. They wed on August 27, 2005, in Amagansett, New York. Downey speaks of Susan's influence with a directness rare for celebrities. She delivered a firm ultimatum. Their bond could not exist alongside his addiction. One had to go. He has frequently stated that she is the reason he survived. At the 2024 Academy Awards, while accepting his Oscar, he described her as his veterinarian. She took in a snarling rescue, he told the world, and loved me back to life. The remark sparked laughter. Yet, beneath the humour, it was a profoundly accurate description of his salvation. The professional landscape witnessed a quiet transformation by 2007. It arrived not through a singular decree, but through a patient accumulation of consistency. His presence on set signaled a renewed stability, a reliability backed by insurers, and a caliber of craft that finally silenced the surrounding turbulence. This recalibrated valuation manifested with undeniable grandeur during the summer of 2008. Iron Man made its debut on May 2nd, 2008, Director Jon Favreau had championed his lead actor against the initial skepticism of Marvel's leadership. Favreau maintained that Tony Stark, a brilliant, narcissistic billionaire, demanded an artist capable of rendering internal chaos as a lived reality rather than a mere performance. He sought someone who had truly inhabited such shadows, compelling the audience to find grace in a deeply flawed man. The actor's own motivation remained far less complex. He simply desired the opportunity. With global earnings reaching $585 million, the production birthed the most lucrative cinematic odyssey in history. Over the next 11 years, he embodied the character across 10 installments, evolving into a global icon. From 2013 to 2015, he stood as the industry's premier earner. Reports suggest his total financial rewards for the saga ranged between $500 million and $600 million. The individual who had exited Corcoran State Prison on a $5,000 bond in August 2000 had, within 18 years, amassed $500 million through the portrayal of a savior. Such a metamorphosis defies easy comprehension. To understand its scale, one must look at the insurance firms that once deemed him unfixable in 2002. By 2013, those very same entities were aggressively vying for the privilege of securing any production bearing his name. Hollywood possesses a long memory. However, its reverence for profit remains infinitely more profound. In that same pivotal year, he appeared in the satire Tropic Thunder, earning a second Academy Award nomination. This recognition arrived a quarter-century after his first, bridging two disparate eras of a journey many believed had reached an early, permanent conclusion. The ensuing decade served as a continuous procession of victories. From the first assembly of heroes in 2012 to the record-breaking heights of Endgame in 2019, the momentum was relentless. His character eventually found his end in a final act of self-sacrifice. Surrounded by the comrades he had navigated a decade of conflict with, the performance required little formal direction. 3 decades of life had already schooled him in the precise emotional weight of a man who, having exhausted all alternatives, resolves to spend his remaining breaths on something truly meaningful. He bid farewell to the persona and signaled his departure from that cinematic universe. New chapters emerged. In 2022, he produced and appeared in a documentary honoring his father's final years. The film captured a terminal intimacy, providing a permanent lens through which to witness their final exchanges. Observers found it impossible to witness such a poignant farewell without feeling a deep, reflective sorrow. The child, who had been introduced to narcotics by his father at age 8, spent their twilight hours collaborating on a shared vision. Whether this act represented a final forgiveness or merely the quiet affection that survives a turbulent past remains unspoken. The imagery conveys what language cannot. It was then that Christopher Nolan entered the narrative. In 2023, Nolan cast him as Louis Strauss for the epic Oppenheimer. The role demanded a portrayal of quiet, calculated resentment, a man whose hostility was masked by professional decorum. It required an actor capable of projecting an intricate internal architecture of bitterness beneath the surface of a polite conversation. Nolan approached him directly, sensing the artist was prepared to venture into uncharted territory. The director believed that challenging a master of his craft to adopt a radically different persona would yield something truly extraordinary. Premiering in July 2023, the film achieved monumental success, earning over $950 million and securing multiple Academy Awards. Critics celebrated his contribution as a career-defining achievement, noting that he had not merely returned to drama, but had redefined its highest standards. On March 10, 2024, he ascended the stage to claim the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. His victory followed a comprehensive sweep of every major industry honor, reflecting a rare and absolute consensus among his peers. At the podium, he surveyed the assembly. He stood in the silent weight of his own history, contemplating the long journey that had led to that singular moment. He expressed his gratitude toward his difficult upbringing, and the Academy, emphasizing them in that specific order. The audience met his words with laughter, yet the sentiment was far from a jest. It was a distilled history of a life lived in extremes, from the shadows of addiction and incarceration to the improbable height of this ultimate professional vindication. He held the golden figure with a firm, steady hand. He confessed that the role had provided him more than he could ever offer in return, stating that he stood there as a person transformed by the experience. 2 months afterward, a masked figure appeared before a massive crowd in San Diego. The directors had just announced their return and signaled their need for a pivotal collaborator before the mask was finally lifted. The thousands in attendance erupted in a state of absolute, unbridled shock. He would rejoin the franchise, not as the fallen hero, but as the formidable Victor Von Doom, scheduled for 2026 and 27. His compensation for these appearances would surpass $50 million per film, supplemented by significant performance-based incentives. Joe Russo observed that the actor was deeply immersed in the character's complex psychology, constantly refining the motivations of a man who views his own cruelty as a necessity. He saw in the role an opportunity to explore a truly multidimensional antagonist. When questioned about a potential return, he responded without hesitation, noting that the legacy was woven into his very identity. He cautioned against doubting the vision of his producers, likening their success to a house that never loses. A brief silence followed. Facing the roar, he remarked that though the mask was fresh, the duty remained unchanged. It would be simple to claim this story has reached its final chapter, to see only the fall and the subsequent glory, the cell and the golden statue, or the broken creature healed by a patient hand. Simple, yet incomplete. Life rarely fits a script, and Robert Downey Jr.'s intricate nature defies such linear sketches. There remains a son, Indio, who came of age while his father moved between courtrooms and clinics. We must weigh the toll of witnessing such a descent and the burden a father bears for casting his child as a spectator to his own collapse. It is a matter of what we carry, what we discard, and the blur where they meet. That narrative is hushed. It lacks the spectacle of a major convention stage or the flash of a victory speech. Yet, it may be the most vital account of all. Consider a portrait that was never captured, yet can be pieced together from the fragments of history if one studies the timeline with enough care. The year is 1993. Robert Downey Jr. is 28. Professionally, he is climbing with an Academy Award nod behind him and a British Academy trophy on a shelf. He is the one the industry watches as a future icon. Privately, however, he is mid-plunge into a 10-year spiral he cannot yet define. His son, Indio Falconer Downey, has arrived into the world. The infant is well, but his union with Deborah Falconer, barely a year old, possesses the fragility of a house built in a storm they wed 42 days after meeting, asking a young love to bear a weight it was never meant to hold. In that phantom image, a father cradles his new son. Deep within that man, etched into the memories of an 8-year-old in Greenwich Village receiving a gift he could neither grasp nor refuse, the legacy is already waiting for its next vessel. The ghost haunting this history is not whether Robert Downey Jr. found his footing. He did. The facts are plain. Since July 2003, by his own word and public record, he has walked a sober path. The true inquiry concerns the price paid by those who had no choice, those who were merely present, merely young, merely there. Indio Falconer Downey entered the world in September 1993. His most formative years were spent watching his father cycle through handcuffs, trials, and prison gates. At 3, during the summer of 1996, he saw the 3 arrests in a single month and the legal dramas broadcast for all to see. He was 6 when his father went to Corcoran. At 7, he watched his father return to win a Golden Globe. By 8, the father was dismissed from work. The mother sought a divorce, and the only home the boy had ever known finally shattered. Deborah Falconer was granted custody, and Indio grew up mainly in her care. In the following years, his father was occupied with reconstruction, first his sobriety, then his profession, then a new life with Susan Levin. From that union came more children and a career path that would eventually lead to Iron Man, immense wealth, and a stage where he spoke of a difficult youth. Indio turned to music, fronting a group called The Seams. He wrote and he performed. He possessed his father's aura, the same brooding gaze, the same sense of coiled power, the same hint that much more stirred beneath the surface than he allowed the world to see. In June 2014, Indio Falconer Downey was apprehended in West Hollywood on a felony narcotics charge. He was 20 years old. His father did not offer a polished, hollow public statement. He spoke a reality far more unvarnished. At the time, Robert Downey Jr. told People magazine that a genetic thread often weaves through addiction, and Indio had likely inherited the strain. He noted that substance abuse is, by its very nature, both terrifyingly dangerous and deeply shaming. He expressed gratitude for the outpouring of care, stating the family was united in Indio's path to wellness. That word genetic carries a heavy burden. It is a public confession that the shadow Robert Downey Sr. cast upon his son in a 1970s apartment did not stop its journey there. It kept traveling. It surfaced 30 years later in a young musician in West Hollywood who had no more power over his legacy than his father had over his own. Indio sought treatment. In the years since, he has discussed his path using words that mirror his father's with startling clarity. In 2015, he described his journey as taking life one day at a time, the precise vernacular of the recovery rooms, used here not as a hollow phrase, but as a map for survival. He has reached his early 30s. He has shared glimpses of his music and his healing, and the weight of being the son of a global icon whose darkest hours were a matter of public record. Whether he has reconciled with those years of paternal absence remains a private matter. That belongs only to them. We know for certain that Robert Downey Jr. stood by his son during that legal battle in 2014. He did not retreat. He named the legacy openly, speaking as a man who recognized the ghost that had haunted his family for generations and refused to let it remain nameless. That gesture carries weight. In the context of this family's bloodline, it is a monumental shift. Robert Downey Sr. passed away on July 7th, 2021, at 85. He had spent his final years contending with Parkinson's, a cruel, slow theft for a creator who lived through motion and the restless energy of the lens. His son shared the news that evening. He wrote that his father died peacefully after enduring the toll of his illness. He hailed him as a pioneer of cinema who kept his spirit high. He added, with the biting wit that defines their kin, that by his stepmother's count, his parents had been blissfully wed for over 2,000 years. Rolling Stone, a witness to the family for decades, described the elder Downey as a man who delighted in challenging the status quo and dismissing polite conventions. As a final summary, it rang true. The film, titled Senior, produced by his son and Chris Smith, reached audiences in December 2022. It stands as a peculiar, beautiful testament, a son turning the lens on a dying father who resists the gaze, finding in that struggle the truth of what it means to be shaped by a man you are still learning to know. In one moment, the younger Downey muses on what the camera represented when his father held the gear. It meant they were together. The lens was their bridge. Perhaps this explains why he is most at home when he is acting. For him, performance was the very language of affection. His father bestowed many things upon him. Some nearly cost him his life. Others made him a singular talent. That friction, the blessing and the curse arriving in a single palm, is the legacy Robert Downey Jr. has spent a lifetime trying to resolve. What he sustained, across all of it, was this: a brilliance so rare it outlived incarceration, ruin, and the industry's betrayal, an illness he never asked for that stole a decade of his prime. A patriarch who loved him through a lens and a vice, nearly destroying them both. A child now battling the same shadow, with a father finally present enough to stand beside him, and a partner who drew a line in the sand and remained to see him cross it. Above all, a willingness seen in every trial and triumph to speak the truth of his own ruin. Such honesty is a rare find in a world that prefers its legends polished and their scars hidden. During the 2024 Academy Awards, Jimmy Kimmel initiated the evening by revisiting Robert's turbulent past, the legal entanglements, the incarceration, and those seasons of very visible ruin. These jests resonated with a particular quality. They were the echoes of a distant storm, met with the cathartic mirth of a crowd finally allowed to speak of a long-understood truth. From his seat, amidst the assembly, Downey joined in their collective amusement. Moments later, clutching the golden statuette, he confessed, "This role was more vital to my soul than I was to the production. I remain here today, transformed into a finer version of myself." His words transcended any single film. He spoke of the grand, expensive, and unlikely odyssey that commenced with a 1970 independent feature and wound through judicial chambers, his affinement, and the depths of personal tragedy. It was a journey from Corcoran State Prison to the grand stages of Comic-Con, culminating at this very lectern. Beside a wife whose devotion had salvaged a man once lost to his own ferocity. This narrative is no simple warning. Such fables conclude in the very ruin they predict. Instead, his path persists. He remains active, readying himself to portray Dr. Doom in 2026, returning once more to the cinematic world that offered him an unearned redemption. His legacy is something far more nuanced and sincere than a mere lesson in failure. The conclusion is found in perseverance. Purchased at a staggering cost, it was secured through 2 decades of private resolve moments, unobserved by any lens. Yielding neither accolades nor public acclaim, this was the quiet, arduous, and essential labor of an individual deciding, day after day, to remain on the path of restoration. Inheritance was thrust upon him unbidden. He passed that burden along before realizing its weight. Then, he ceased, and in that stillness, he remained. On certain dawns, that suffices. On others, it represents the entire world. The details within this chronicle are sourced from official memoirs, judicial archives, and validated reportage, citing Rolling Stone, Variety, and the major broadcasting networks alongside public testimonies from the subject and his inner circle. In instances of conflicting narratives, we have provided clear clarification. Should you or a companion face personal hardship, the 988 Crisis Lifeline offers assistance at all hours via telephone or message to 988.